Hello, Microsoft Windows developers. This is the fifth and final video in this short series. Finally, we will show how to build Bitcoin daemon that we have alluded to at the end of each of the four previous library building videos using Microsoft Visual C++ on Visual Studio Express 2005. And by implication, all the newer versions of Microsoft Visual Studio 2. This is not the only way to do this. It is but a way. First, an aside, one of many. In the previous video on building the LevelDB static multithreaded library, I alluded to, but didn't explicitly show, the other directories to exclude from the project. That other directory is the issues directory in the port directory of LevelDB. As you see, it has a few .cc files and another one here and some HTML. And to exclude them all from the build, one right-clicks and just says exclude from build. Done. That's what you have to do. And so let's go back to the Bitcoin development here. And the next aside, to be shown presently, is another method to produce Bitcoin code in Microsoft Visual Studio, done by another Microsoft Windows developer, done completely differently, but we both arrive at the same point with Microsoft compiled Bitcoin executables. So let's put together the four previous libraries built in the short videos that came before this one: the OpenSSL, the Boost, the Berkeley database, and the LevelDB database library. And we will use them to create two separate cryptocurrency daemon programs, Bitcoin and Yacoin. Of course, one needs the Bitcoin daemon or other alternate cryptocurrency sources corrected for the stricter Microsoft compilers. To that end, I have supplied a GitHub commit for the Bitcoin 086 sources at the following URL. Here we go, this one here. And you can download the zip if you look in the lower left corner. There's the zip. And you can unzip it in the directory of your choice. And so let's launch Visual Studio again. So back in Visual Studio, let's start a new project from existing code. And again, pretty screen, click Next, and let's browse. I won't bore you with the navigating details, but let's go to the Bitcoin 6 directory and give a project name, say, how about Bitcoin daemon video? Sounds like a good project name. This is next, but this time we choose console application project because we're building the daemon. We'll fill out the definitions and paths in the IDE, which seems more natural. Release, same as debug. And there we have a project, and it sees everything. Okay. Before continuing, let me say that I am not the first to do this. Back around November or December of last year, 2013, both Claire123 of the following site, you can see, the forum called now at GitHub, Bitcoin.exe and Visual Studio 2013, 32 and 64-bit, and Qt 5.2. Wow. See URL. We both independently succeeded at porting Bitcoin back to Microsoft Visual Studios. Hers was the more formidable task of porting Bitcoin Daemon and Bitcoin Qt to Microsoft Visual Studio for 32 and 64-bit. Brava! You can see her how-to heuristic recipe in her Bitcoin 086 zip in the Microsoft Visual Studio directory, which is here, and it's this README, so we'll open it. And you can read this at your leisure, but you will find familiarity between this and Nitrogenetics' famous heuristic recipe on building headless Bitcoin and Bitcoin Qt on Windows, another forum on bitcointalk.org, which we will show presently. Nevertheless, as the applause subsides from the previous brava, we have to configure our project of Bitcoin Daemon. And much like we did for LevelDB, I have to set the properties of the project. So let's do that. Let me bring it onto the screen. Okay. And we're going to get an application exe. That's perfectly alright. But code generation, we want, for debug mode, we want multi-threaded debug. Let's apply. For release, we don't want multi-threaded DLL. We want multi-threaded, which is static. Apply. And I believe that's about it for the moment. What we have to do is tell Visual Studio where the header files and the lib files of the 4 libraries we created are on our computer. And in Visual Studio 2005, the magic place is Tools, Options, Projects and Solutions, Visual C++ Directories. There's a nice 2010 Visual Studio Google YouTube on Boost, and in Visual Studio 2010 you see this same window here, but you get to it by a similar tortuous path that's somewhat different. But I'll leave it to you to find that video, but you'll recognize this screen. And here we are at the include directories. If you remember, when we built our Visual Studio, we put our libraries in a directory, libs, videos, some date, and we just named the boost root, the OpenSSL include, the Berkeley database build Windows directory, and for LevelDB we say the LevelDB include, and the LevelDB helpers directory. I believe the source directory here is for the benefit of the unit tests, which is a different project. And so one would have to enter all of these. We could do one just for fun. You could use this to insert a new line, hit the ellipsis and browse, which I will then spare you the time wasted. Okay, we are back. Put the window in view. We're going to do the Berkeley database. And we need the build Windows directory, and I believe that's all we need for the include. And it already fills it in. You notice it's the same as this other one, so I'll just remove this other one. And similarly, you would do it for the 4 libraries you built. Once again, Boost, OpenSSL, Berkeley Database, and LevelDB, these 3. And that's the include files. We must also do the library files. And similarly, you see this Visual Studio has already been set up, but similarly we point to the libraries. Again, same path, libs, videos, date, Boost directory, and then lib32, Microsoft Visual C 8.0, that's 2005. OpenSSL is a live VC static. Berkeley Database, kind of lost it. Berkeley Database is in the build Windows / Win32 release static and release debug directories. And the LevelDB libraries are in Bitcoin source / LevelDB / release and debug. Of course, this depends upon where you started your LevelDB project. If you start down another level or elsewhere, then you'd have to change this path to wherever the Visual Studio built those libraries in the release and debug directories that it created. And that's about it for configuring Visual Studio for building a Bitcoin daemon and a Yacoin daemon and however many other daemons you choose to build. And you don't have to do anything else. So we'll say OK here and back to our project. Okay, this has configured Visual Studio so that the 4 libraries we've installed now have their library files in the known paths, just like the system library files. And for any project. Done once and forget about it, as it were. Well, almost. All that's left is to notify the particular project or solution you are working on, say Bitcoin for example, of the actual names of the library files. And so again, we select the project, properties, only this time we just tell the linker input in additional dependencies, have them on the clipboard, but if you remember when we built the OpenSSL, the library names were libeay32 multi-threaded debug, SSL EAY32 multi-threaded debug. The Berkeley database was libdb48sd .lime, and LevelDB was LevelDB 1.13d, and we added the D ourselves. Now these remaining libraries are Windows libraries and used by Windows calls that are made in the source code. I believe the majority of which are in the OpenSSL code. And so we click OK, we say apply, and we've done the debug. Now we have to do the same thing for release. And so we paste again, but this time we remember to remove the trailing D from the OpenSSL, the Berkeley, and the LevelDB library. And that's it. So we say apply. And we're pretty much done. There's just one more optional thing, not required. But before we do that, let's take a little diversion to show a similarity. Let's look at the makefile for MingW for Windows of the GCC version. And we notice a lot of similarity, which is intentional, with respect to what are the libraries, where are they located, what are the include paths, what is the boost suffix, compiler options. We'll come back to this one right here in a moment. I'll just highlight it and we'll say what it is. And now back to our task. So we go back here. Let's pick one of these files just for fun. Okay. Again, properties, preprocessor definitions. The optional define is in homage to the matrix. I'll apply. And I want it in the release mode too. Okay, you don't have to do this. But if you do, what will happen is this file will be included at the beginning and of those source files that need it. And what it does is it prevents you from being inundated with Boost and Bitcoin source warnings during the compile process. The blue pill define hides a selective warning blocker as opposed to the bludgeon -w, which I highlighted before, argument in the GCC compiler makefile for bitcoind.exe. You could comment out any one of these and then you would see those warnings pop up as you built the project, and you could actually go in and correct the code if you felt like it, which wouldn't be a bad idea for some of them. One last aside before we build, and this refers to the OpenSSL library I showed in the first video. Those libraries were built using Microsoft Visual Studio 2008, and as such, Microsoft Visual Studio 2005 doesn't really know how to read, I believe, the debug versions. And so Microsoft supplies a patch to Visual Studio 2005. And this URL, which I gave verbally in the OpenSSL video, and you notice it just says it fixes the error message in Visual Studio 2005 Service Pack 1 when you try to read a lib file or an OBJ file created using Visual Studio 2008. And you download it, you apply it, and that's the end of that. So back to the build. I think we're ready to build. But before we can build, we have to exclude from the project all those files that are not part of the project, which means source files. And so the easiest way is to just highlight all the directories LevelDB we just built in the last video, so we don't have to do that. Qt, We don't want tests. You can build in a separate video. And then we say exclude from project. And that should do all of them. Notice when I downloaded it, Microsoft is smart enough to mark the GCC makefiles as not part of a Microsoft project. So let's just save. Always a good idea. And now if everything is good, we should be able to say let's do the release mode first. And just say build solution. And I won't bore you staring at this screen. I will pause and come back in about 10 minutes when it'll be done, which is about the same time it takes to compile using GCC. And here we are back with the build done in 12 minutes and 56 seconds. Let's see. And there it is. The exe has been created. And so I won't bore you with doing the debug version, but it'll be roughly the same amount of time.